Good morning and Happy New Year. It's about 9 o'clock. Uh, I felt the need to come on and do a brief rant about the Fiscal Cliff for a couple of reasons. One is uh, on New Year's Eve, the day you think people are discussing politics the least, I have a whole bunch of people blowing up my phone after midnight, not with Happy New Year, Jay, but with what happened with Fiscal Cliff. So first, let me just say, everyone needs to take a deep breath. The deal is done, at least on our side. We still have to wait for the House to vote on it. I'm still giving it 60-40 that the House doesn't pass the Fiscal Cliff deal as proposed by the Senate. They need Democratic votes for the majority of the vote in the House. Without Nancy Pelosi's willing participation, without the president leaning on the House Dems, it won't pass. But the deal itself is not that bad. Here is what we have. Let me give you the good news or the bad news first. I'll start with the good news. Okay. There are only about 28 billion in additional spending cuts. 14 from defense, 14 from discretionary spending. That's an accounting error in this environment. We're talking about numbers this high. So there really are no spending cuts. There's about 600 to 700 billion in additional tax revenue. It would have been over $1 trillion, but the president gave in on raising the floor for the new tax rates from 250 to 400,000 for individuals, 450 for couples. Now, a lot of people are going to be upset about this. I'm not one of them. Here's why. In the Northeast, 250 is not rich. Now, let me qualify that for a moment. 250 is always going to be wealthy, but what 250 is not is rich. In New York, 250 is solidly middle class. You know, your tuition for private school for your kids is going to be about 30 a year. So let's say you're a family of 4, you have 2 kids, you're making 250. That's 60 grand in tuition. Okay, so you're starting to see that this is not a wealthy family. They're well off, they're financially comfortable, you know, but in the Northeast corridor, that's Northern Virginia to Boston, 250 is not rich. That's not just a swath of people who voted for the president. That's a large portion of the population of the United States. If you look at San Francisco, if you look at LA, if you look at Chicago, even 250 isn't rich. So, moving that to 400, moving that to 450. See, this is a debate that we could have been having instead of arguing about whether or not people who make $25 million a year should see their taxes go up. So, again, it's not a terrible get for the Republicans. It is a concession from the president, a very serious one, and for that, I don't want to hear any other complaints from the Republicans about any other part of the bill. Now, we extended some farm subsidies, we extended some educational tax credits, we extended a number of smaller but very beneficial financial things for education, for green technology, for R&D, things that will have a stimulative effect and a long-term strategic effect for the country. So the good news is that we got what we came to get. Bad news is we didn't solve the sequester. We didn't solve the longer structural issues, and instead we kicked them down the road until the middle of the debt ceiling fight. Now, everybody has a different theory on the debt ceiling. You have people who are very good at this, who do this stuff, you know, exclusively for a living, unlike me, who say that the debt ceiling is going to be a bloody battle. Me, I honestly don't think that it is, and here's why. On one hand, you have the Republicans who are not going to raise the debt ceiling. There is no fight if the other side is never going to raise the debt ceiling. No matter what we do, no matter what we offer them, no matter what we attempt to buy them with, they're not raising the debt ceiling. So since they are not going to raise the debt ceiling, I say if they want to crash, let it crash. Now, okay, that's an aggressive stance. It's a little bit of a radical stance. And people wonder why someone who would have that stance about the debt ceiling wouldn't say, let's just go over the cliff and suck it up as we deal with the January debacle of tax rates going up. The problem with the fiscal cliff wasn't the tax rates going up, it was the ancillary costs to people. Unemployment insurance, which we now have covered for the next year or so, was going to be gone for 2 million people. But it wasn't just those 2 million people. When February came around, an additional 2 million people were going to start losing their coverage, and it was going to go every month in an escalating number. Let me again explain why that is a catastrophic result. Now, what we have in the Northeast is winter. Okay? Southern California, I don't know what the weather's like. You know, Atlanta, I'm not sure that you guys have a full grasp of what winter is. But here in, you know, outside of Philadelphia or Indiana, Pennsylvania, it's 30 degrees, there's snow on the ground, and even though we haven't had a really cold winter in 20 years almost, winter is winter. And heating oil prices are insane, gas prices are insane, people need their unemployment checks, people need their LEAP, which is the low-income energy subsidy. They need these things that were all expiring, and winter is not the time to do this. You're going to have catastrophic results if you start messing with people's already fragile safety net supported income during the winter. In the spring, it's still tough, but it's nowhere near as tough as the winter. And then you have the summer where we can work some stuff out and take some risks. But again, people who are unhappy with this deal, none of them are on the edge of being homeless. None of them are out on the street. None of them are, you know, in a position where their unemployment benefits are about to run out. And so while intellectually I agree, I understand that there are problems with this deal, on a human level, you got to understand that there are real costs and real consequences to going over the cliff. And politically, as a pure matter of strategy, the president probably could have held out and stuck it to the Republicans a little bit more, but I don't know that he could have gotten much more. I don't know if there's much more to get. The president has put in place a structure here, okay, a superstructure for future negotiations. And what he said that really angered people at his press conference yesterday, where Swagalicious was back, is any future cuts to spending have a revenue increase, meaning that we're not done with the tax issue. That taxes aren't capped at 39.6 in some magical, mythical way. They could go up higher. The estate tax, something else that we dealt with in this issue, was going to go to 50%. Instead, we compromised it and went to 40%, with an exemption for the first $5 million. Now, people are unhappy with that, but again, the coalition that supports things like the estate tax reform is a weird coalition. It's not just rich people, it's people who are farmers. It's the Congressional Black Caucus, mostly because you have the first generation of black millionaires leaving stuff to their kids. It's, again, it's complicated. So there are coalitions and rivers and eddies of people within the African American community, within the Democratic coalition, within the Hispanic community, within the rural versus urban, all of these different groups are together and they're cutting deals, and sometimes you get a little hodgepodge. Sometimes you get a little sometimes you get a little bit of a mess in what things look like, but you have to understand the background for each thing. People didn't understand that food stamps are linked with the farm bill and have been for 50 years, because you have to get urbanites to vote for a rural subsidy, and the way to do that is the most people on food stamps are in the urban areas, the most people who are getting the farm subsidies are in the rural areas, so everybody gets a little something. The school lunch program is built into the farm bill. That's not an accident. That's a means of getting urban people to vote for something that helps the rural communities of the country. Just things that were saved during this process. Milk was going up to $8 a gallon, between $6 and $8 a gallon. People are laughing, saying, "Why would milk go up that much?" Well, there's a massive milk subsidy where the government pays dairy farmers to artificially keep prices low. Now, you may ask, why do we do that? This is a free market society. This is America. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we do it because people who are poor need milk for their kids. It benefits us all when those kinds of things exist. So, we find ourselves in this unique space where the Democrats are acting as both the responsible party and the opposition party. We're doing all the work. We're doing all the lifting because the GOP is incapable of functioning in either a political way or a governance way. So, again, Happy New Year. The cliff is not as dire as we all may have thought it was last night when we heard the deal was not good. The deal is about as good as you're going to get it today, and the president did a pretty good job. I'll close with this last thing. Everyone's scared that the president's going to get rolled during the debt ceiling debate. Krugman is especially hard on him. Robert Reich, especially hard on the president. Ariana Huffington in the Huffington Post, especially hard. Steve Kornacki was especially hard on the president about the Fiscal Cliff deal. Here's what I'm going to say. The last time we negotiated over the debt ceiling, the Republicans lost the 2012 election. They gave the president a $600 billion stimulus package to extend the Bush tax cuts for 2 years. That's not an awful outcome. In fact, that's actually a winning outcome because the president was able to use the issue all throughout the campaign as a means of punishing the Republicans. But more important than that, the stimulus had GDP at 3.5%, which is the highest it's been since 2007, 2006, maybe even 2005. So what the Republicans are doing is trying to slow down the economic recovery, which is at 3.5 GDP, actual recovery. We're not just clicking along at the low levels anymore. We are now actually in recovery, and there is an opportunity here for great expansion of the tax base, great expansion of the employment opportunities for the country. We could get the unemployment rate from 7.8, which is about where it is now, depending on which numbers are coming out. We could get that number significantly lower. We could get unemployment into the mid-6s or the low 6s or the upper 5s in the next 4 years if we play this correctly. And if unemployment's in the 5s, not only do we win the next cycle, which is 2014, we win the next several presidential cycles. This is a longer and more complicated deal than just who won the optics, who won this piece here, who won that piece there. Taxes have gone up on wealthy people for the first time in 20 years. The Republicans are going to be forced to vote for taxes to go up for the first time in 30 years. We're at this position where we're breaking their will, and by doing so, by so doing, we are empowering our arguments as we go forward. I think we're in an okay spot. It's not ideal. It's not perfect, but I think we're in an okay spot. Peace. Happy New Year.